Hello, and welcome to another episode of Intune.training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune. The Steve and Adam Show with Ben, the intern.
Hi, Adam. Hi,
Hey,
Ben.
boys!
Hey, Adam.
Been like
How are we all going?
5 minutes since we saw you guys.
5 minutes. It could be a whole week. Who knows?
Or a month.
More. 2 3 weeks. Really trying to space these out. How's it going, guys?
It's going good.
It's good.
It's going good. Lovely Saturday here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Sun's
amazing.
out.
You guys in the future?
Guns out.
We are. Yeah, we're in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you've watched us from the beginning, or if you've recently seen our first episode, the backstory here is, we started this channel as Adam doesn't know anything about Intune, and let's all learn during that journey as I'm, Steve kind of coaching me through the process, and as we're having these discussions, and we haven't really had any direction on where it's going, but ultimately, as we've been doing this in the background during the day job, I've been working towards moving our corporate environment to modern and trying to get to Intune and trying to implement some of the things that we've been doing. And so as you guys are learning this content, I'm learning it as well. And part of that learning process is trying to learn things to the point that you know it technically deep enough to be able to implement and understand and troubleshoot, but also knowing it in a way that you can simplify it. I saw a tweet the other day that said something to the effect of that when you can simplify a topic, a deeply technical topic, it's an illustration that you know it very, very well.
Yes.
And so this week we had an opportunity to present our plan for modern, including autopilot, Hello for Business, and different things, to our review board to get approval to begin implementation of all the stuff. And so as we did that, I had to really dig deep on Hello for Business and understand, like, okay, how does this really work? How can I talk to security and tell them why this is good? And how can I talk to the networking guy? Like, so how do we move this? Because to them, it's just, number one, what does Hello for Business mean? What does it do? Why do we need it? Passwords are great. Why would we need this other thing? And so,
What do I do with my password policy?
Well, and so if you watched our Hello for Business, how to implement it video long ago, I even as we were doing it, I was looking at it saying, I don't understand. I kept asking Steve, even afterwards, like several times for the last year and a half, Steve, I don't understand how a PIN is safer than a password. It's shorter. How is this safer? I don't get it. And then this week I had to present why it was better to some people. And I feel like I had that light bulb moment. And while it's fresh, I feel like, hey, let's have a conversation about what I feel like I've learned about Hello and why Hello and Hello for Business, and why it's important to implement it, and why it's way more secure, and the benefits of it. And so this is hopefully going to be a discussion that you can, share this video with your managers, or use this as a way to get your talking points in order to be able to have these same conversations and get comfortable with the technology. I don't believe we're really going to have really any demos on this, but I may bring up some web pages to show graphics if we need to as we go. But ultimately, we just want to talk through Hello for Business in just general terms on what it does and how it works.
Yes.
It's a really long intro, but
It was.
You get it. You get where we're headed.
Be forewarned. It's a lot of talking.
Okay, so in simple terms, most home users today either have a cell phone or have a home computer that they are using some sort of biometric or PIN. So the biometric gesture, the documentation calls it gesture. So if you're using your fingerprint, if you're using your a retina scan, if you're using a face, if you're using, or even if you're using a smart card, or a what's those, the YubiKey type
the FIDO keys and stuff.
FIDO keys, yes. So all of those things are different pieces of this puzzle. So hello is the Windows biometric credentialing component, essentially. It's the way to securely store a credential on your device and in your TPM. So the TPM is your trusted platform module. If you're doing BitLocker or any sort of, sorry, I'm trying to use generic terms, but BitLocker's, if you're doing drive encryption, using the TPM to store the encryption keys so that you can unlock that device. And so your TPM itself is probably the most important security component of your whole computer. It's a separate chip in the BIOS or in the on your board that has its own security controls, tamper protection, and all sorts of different things. So like if you're using it for BitLocker, the way it works is it knows your drive. The TPM knows if you've messed with the boot order or tried to do anything, and so it says, wait, you changed something since last time I trusted you. So now you have to give me your unlock pin for me to unlock it.
Yeah, 25 character key.
So we've got this nice, security component, a vault. So let's just call it a vault because I think that's a really easy concept.
It is what it is. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
So the vault has different keys to unlock different pieces of it. So it's a vault within a vault. And it's like a safety deposit room. You can get into the vault.
Or a password management system.
You have to have a key to get into the things. So the light bulb for me was that the PIN or the biometric gesture is not the password. It is not. Yeah. It is the key to unlocking the vault that holds
on that device, but only on that device.
That's right.
Only on that device. And so you have to have the thing. You have to have the biometric to unlock the vault to then retrieve a secure credential out of that vault. So if you're just doing Windows Hello,
it's actually not the whole credential as well.
That's
right. Part of the credential that gets exchanged with AAD.
Wait. No, sorry. No, don't jump ahead.
It's not because we're just talking about hello right now.
Not hello for business. It's a distinction. So
yes, it is.
If you're using hello actually is storing your password hash. So you're using the PIN as a replacement for your password to get to your password, which then gets used to then unlock and authenticate you on your own personal device. It's not the same as hello for business. So hello for business is a completely different mechanism or completely different credential. Let's say that. So it's using hello, the storage mechanism, the security mechanism for the credential. But the business piece creates a private key that gets stored in the TPM, and then it gets a public key that gets sent to your Azure AD user object, to your user object, and stored with your. So if you were looking at this visually, you would have your user account, and it has a password object attached to it, and now you get a Hello for Business credential object that is unique for that user and that device specifically.
Correct.
And each new device that you create a credential on, or that you set up Hello for Business and you enroll in, you get a new credential that gets added to your Azure AD user object. That's significant because that means that the credential, when you unlock with your gesture, the credential is now available to be used. Your private key gets sent to Azure AD. Azure AD then validates that, or then it connects that credential with your private or your public key, and then it sends those together. So this is the piece I don't know, Steve, so you can fill in this blank. So when you're in Azure AD already and you put those two pieces together, I'm assuming Azure AD itself sends a token or ticket back to the device, right?
Yeah,
that's correct.
So if you're doing
because it doesn't need to get the password at that point, because
it doesn't care.
When you look at the user object, you're going to see a section inside the graph called, I think it's credentials or something associated to that name. but then there's a little string that's literally says NGC. That there includes the key that gets written back to AAD, as well as the device that it's associated to. So you can actually go in there and look at the device ID associated to that NGC and then link it back and say, yes, that device has an NGC. And I know what Ben's going to ask, what does NGC stand for?
Thank you, Microsoft.
Gen Credential.
How about that?
It's the Microsoft way. It's lead with the acronym and talk about what it means later. NGC is next gen credential.
So
that's right.
Okay. Now, if you've watched our catastrophe of a video that was how to do Hello for Business credentials for on-prem resources, you saw us struggle for a very, very long time and eventually succeed, but very poorly, on connecting your Hello credential with your Azure AD on-premises credential. And as we were going through that, it was obvious to some folks who even told us that we didn't know what we were doing with it. And we were trying to figure it out as we went. And now that I have gone through that piece and now deeper at Hello for Business, all of that makes much more sense at this point.
Yep.
Totally.
So I know we generally don't talk about the hybrid piece of things, but this is the world I'm living in. So and there are other people that will benefit from this. So let's talk about the hybrid piece and why this matters.
This is the part where, yes, we don't traditionally talk about hybrid at the device level. This is hybrid for the user object. This is super important. This is how your AAD joined devices get access to the on-prem resources, whether it's your Wi-Fi, whether it's your on-prem file servers, whether it's your print server. It's how you get access, because what happens, and I'm going to steal Adam's thunder here a little bit.
It's fine.
So what actually is happening in the background is you need to make sure that you have Azure Active Directory Connect installed, or AAD Connect installed on your network and syncing your password hashes.
Correct.
Once you have that, you also then need to make sure you have the latest schema. I can't stress this enough.
Pause there. Okay, we've been doing this in production, and we ran into this. The schema is a huge thing. So our domain controllers are Server 2012 R2. We're in the process of migrating. It's a project this year. So we've got some 2016 domain controllers, but they're not all there. Our PDC roles are still running on 2012. So there's a trick. You can move the roles, move the FSMA role over to your 2016 domain controller.
Do you know which role you need to move over?
The PDC role.
Schema master.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Schema master is separate. All you need is the schema master moved across, because it'll update the schema to that version of the domain.
Okay. I'll double check.
It needs to be done at the enterprise level. So if you've got a 2-tier domain, it needs to be done at the forest level, not the domain level, because the forest dictates the schema.
Okay.
But yeah, technically, you just need to have the 2016 schema for Active Directory, as well as there's a key admins group that gets created when you do that. There is a methodology on how you do it without it, but you can do that. It will work. So I know a very large financial organization in Australia has two 2016 domain controllers, and the rest of them are 2008, and they can run their whole environment with Hello for Business on that. And it works, and it's fully supported, mostly. But what that means, the reason why I say mostly is because what that means is when a request comes through from a device that needs to have a KDC, which is the Kerberos Distribution Center, I think it is, authentication level, which is what has the ability to decrypt that credential and pass it to a file server or associated.
Yep.
Any of those requests have to then go to a 2016 or 2012 domain controller. They will not work on a 2008 domain controller. So that's probably the only thing, or that is the only thing that you just need to be aware of. So what happens is the one that Adam's showing here right now is the MSDS key credential link object only exists in the 2016 schema.
And here's the tricky bit. There is so the schema itself. So we did this. We moved the role, and the schema got updated, and we could see the attributes on our user and device objects. But then we went into Azure AD Connect, and it wouldn't work. I'm still waiting, and it turns out that you actually have to refresh the schema in Azure AD Connect to pull down and build out these guys. So if these are missing, you need to go, and you've already done the move. You've moved the roles, and you can see the attributes. Go and update your schema in Azure AD Connect, and these will get created, as well as what Steve's talking about. These are all the steps for how to make Azure AD Connect all work with it and everything. But that key admins group and all that stuff just magically shows up when you do these steps. But this, we'll put this article in the description. But this was the lifesaver right here, because
definitely
I found this and it's wait that's it, that's how we get there.
Nice.
So the other thing to add in there, Adam, is when you do the schema update for AD Connect, make sure you use the wizard. While it's fantastic to go and use the Azure Active Directory service application where you can go and set all your schedules and everything associated, if you do it through there, you have to specify a new user object because you don't know the password for the service account running it. Right. But if you use the wizard on the desktop, it just works without it. It will leverage that service account. Okay. So it's super important you do it through the desktop.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to run yourself into issue.
We did it manually, and then it turns out you had to do it in two places, and we missed one, and so it still didn't work. Right. But we actually, for whatever reason, we changed the username and password when we built it out initially, long ago, and so we know the username and password, so not nearly as big of a deal. But like that service account is protected in our password vault and things, and so there was more security around being able to know that credential instead of having it use the built-in one. So I think we've kind of taken a detour down into the
hybrid key trust
world. But it's very important because that's exactly.
Can I add one extra bit, right?
One more thing. All right.
Don't do certificate key trust.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah, so there's two scenarios. There's hybrid key trust and certificate key trust. Why a lot of people have an interest in certificate key trust is because it doesn't have the schema requirements of a 2016 domain controller. You can leverage older domain controllers and it'll just work. There's huge drawbacks with using certificate key trust, where there's a requirement to have a certificate on every user device so they can sign in. And it gets beyond that, and maintaining it can be very, very, very complicated. It's not something that is promoted as much as the hybrid key trust scenario that we're recommending.
Yeah, I mean, all the documentation on setting up like that Kerberos token passback stuff, it always says there are two ways to do it, but there's really only one way to do it. Like, strongly recommended that you do the key trust one.
Yeah, that's super, super important.
Exactly. And again, I know we've said it and we'll continue to say it, but this is one of the most complicated parts of doing Zero Trust Cloud managed devices. And, you know, it's because, again, the next gen credential is not a Kerberos credential. Or, you know, there needs to be some way to swap those over, and this is what this is. Hopefully, eventually we get to a point where everything works with next gen credentials, and we can just be done with Kerberos, but I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime.
It's not going to be anytime soon.
No,
because there's just too many things associated to it.
Exactly.
So what Adam's showing there is the fact that you can sit there and explicitly say require a certificate for on-prem resources. This is where you're using hybrid certificate trust, which,
like we're saying, you don't want to do.
It's an edge case.
So I'm pointing out that
sure.
it is here, but leave it turned off.
Yeah.
So all right. So let's go back and talk hello credential again now. So but that's where all of that what we just talked about is where you want to get to. And so understanding why this credential is required and what that hybrid trust really is important, because the rest of this is why that works. So so if I log into my device with my Azure AD device with my PIN, so I've enrolled in Hello for Business, and I've now, so when I type in my PIN, it unlocks the TPM, it gets my private key, it sends it up to Azure AD, and then Azure AD has a copy or has my public key and then sends it to Azure AD for authentication. Great. So that's my cloud, all cloud Azure AD authentication. So now I take that same device and I go internal, and I'm on the business network. Let's say, so in my case, I'm on a hybrid join device. And so I log in with my, essentially with my domain credential. It's expecting my domain credential, but I'm logging in with an Azure credential. But because I've created this new credential, the next gen credential that is now stored with my Azure AD user object, and that's what I'm unlocking with my PIN. I'm not unlocking my domain credential. I'm unlocking my Azure AD credential, even though I'm on a domain join device. Okay, so how do I get my domain join device to talk to domain resources if I'm using a non-domain credential?
To add a wrinkle to that, Adam, you can actually do Windows Hello for Business purely through AAD and group policy.
Really?
Okay.
Yes. And it will go on right in, I believe, into the credential link attribute and everything associated.
Right.
But don't.
You can actually do Hello for Business on-prem as well.
Yeah.
Straight on. Also, don't do it.
Well, I mean, I imagine that concept has gone, we want PIN, but we don't know why. So here's a solution to do it.
Well, we want biometric signing
in the cloud.
Yeah, for sure. It's
we want secure
another way to sign into the device,
but we don't want them. We don't want it in the cloud.
Sure. I can understand the use case, but yeah.
So now I want to access my domain resources from a either domain joined or non-domain joined device. It doesn't matter. Azure AD join either. Either way, I'm unlocking an Azure AD credential, and now I'm trying to take that credential and I'm trying to access on-premises resources that are expecting Kerberos or other legacy authentication, and it doesn't work. So because you're without the hybrid key trust piece, your domain controller that is trying to when you try to access that file server is talking to AD and saying, hey, do you know who this is? These credentials work for accessing me, and AD says, I don't have any idea who that is.
Sure.
And so it denies the access. So the hybrid key trust, the deal here is we're syncing the password hash sync, but we're also in that sync, we're actually synchronizing your next gen credential. We're synchronizing all of your Hello public keys down to Azure or to Active Directory, to your on-premises domain controllers. So now what happens is you can, just like Steve mentioned before, you can go to Graph and you can see the next gen key on your Azure AD user object. You can also see the same next gen keys on your AD user objects. And if you go watch our other video, the Hello for Business thing, if you can slog through it, we talk about using a tool called LDP. Micro Scott has the blog that talks about using that to verify. But you can see that credential and see the devices that it goes to. So each new device you enroll, you can see all of those sitting there. So then what happens is you unlock your device, and now you hit that domain resource, and you then talk to the on-premises Active Directory, and you get your public key that you send your private key, you get your public key, it sends that to the domain controller and says, hey, give me, I need access. And it says, oh, I trust this person, and it gives it a TGT, the ticket generating ticket. So it gives you a Kerberos ticket that then is valid for that session to be able to access those domain resources. And so now here's the trick. I think we probably talked about this in the previous video. You're going to be limited as to what that credential will work on because it's Kerberos. Yes. And there are legacy authentication protocols that do not work with Kerberos, and they will not work with this because you're not getting a domain credential. You're getting a Kerberos ticket issued from the domain because it trusts your non-domain credential, your next-gen credential.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, so while we're talking about this, so this is something that I've been looking at myself internally because we're having some DNS issues that are causing our that Kerberos trust thing to fail, and talking about the next-gen credentials and that whole thing. So the new NGC token, or the key credential value in AD,
the MS key credential,
the MS key credential,
MSDS key credential.
Correct. Now that is not readily available just by going into like RSAT tools, right? You need to go in and actually look at the extensions because it's a non-standard value, right? Someone's actually written a really good PowerShell module that's only been downloaded 1,000 times. It's crazy. It's called WHfBTools, and it allows you.
Hello business. All right.
Correct. Yeah. It allows you to simply point at a user object, and it will return all those keys, so you can validate whether there is a sync mismatch or whether there are any problems with it. You can identify how many key credentials have been added to that user, so you can see each one for each device. It's fantastic. We'll put a link to it in the description. Just wanted to let everyone know that there is a way to sort of access this data without having to sort of jump through hoops to get it.
So, okay, so here's a bit of trivia for you, Steve. And Ben, if you're looking at it, there's a key credential on device objects too.
Yes, correct. But so the scenario that I had was I was talking to my good friend Steve, and the first thing that he said was, "Yeah, that guy right there." He was saying the first thing you should check is just make sure that there aren't any synchronization issues, because sometimes AAD Connect can get out of whack, and the key credential doesn't update on both sides, right? So all I wanted to do was, yes, I can get that data through Graph very easily, or through the UI or whatever. It's quite easy to get it in AAD, but to get it from AD requires you to look at the extension. It's a nightmare. Dealing with the UI of all the AD tools is nasty. It's not fun. So using this module allowed me to simply just get the data. I had both of them in PowerShell then, so then I could compare the two strings. So I didn't need to read the huge thing. I just went, are there any differences? And there wasn't. So I knew that there was a sync. Obviously, I can also use the sync health of my AD Connect and all that sort of fun stuff. But at least this way, I had, without a shadow of a doubt, I knew that there was no synchronization issues.
Well, I think that's great because I don't have access to Azure AD Connect in my production environment. I don't, I'm not allowed to touch that.
And you probably shouldn't. Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
And so I'm not going in there and looking at the sync issues or being able to see any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I do have access to user objects, and I can go and pull up data. And so being able to have an alternate way to do that, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'm gonna chuck a link in the chat now, and as I said, we'll put it in the description because it's fantastic.
And back to your question there, Adam, about the devices having the MS key credential link. Yeah, of course they do, because there's going to be certain circumstances where the devices need to have that authentication level.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to note, and this is a really important thing, is when you sign into the computer, if you change it to sign in with your password, it's not signing in with your AAD Hello for Business identity. It's signing in with your AAD user object. while it sounds like they're the same thing, the next-gen credential will return this level of information and token object for your account, whereas your password will return all of the legacy authentication protocols as well. Mm-hmm. So it will work straight away for file servers and things like that if you don't have your AAD Connect sync working correctly.
Correct.
Things like that. So when you're doing testing, don't rely on passwords.
Yes.
Make sure you're testing the PIN. When you're using Hyper-V, and I'm assuming VMware has the same thing, which is the enhanced session mode.
Yep.
As soon as you're using enhanced session mode, it's using remote desktop. In remote desktop, you don't have the ability to use a PIN to sign in or a Hello for Business scenario. So therefore, you're not signing in with your Hello for Business token. You're signing in with the AAD token, which gives you permission straight through to the file servers and everything associated.
Correct.
So make sure when you're doing your testing that you're checking these things out first.
Yes,
100%.
So,
and it's also worth to note. It's also worth to note that if you're having problems with your hybrid key trust stuff, and you just need to get access to something, just log out, log in with your username and your password, and you'll get past it. I don't know who's watching this that needs to know that, but there are ways around this until you can fix the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, okay, so one of the arguments. So I mean, you brought up some good stuff there. So password. So we haven't touched on password yet. Okay, so if we go back to the beginning of the deal, part of the argument here is it's using passwords less. It's not passwordless. You can get there somehow magically, but this is using passwords less and specifically trying to limit the spread, or
it's how often you type it in.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so Microsoft's stance is. They've got a document that says, we've stopped having a password reset policy because we found that people they create less secure passwords now because they're trying to remember them every 60 days and it gets aggravating trying to remember a complex password. So they just increment a number or whatever. And so the idea is we want to get people to use less passwords. Okay, so obviously we just talked about some we still need our password because we need to get to legacy stuff sometimes still. So great.
Yep.
One of the solutions around that is, get rid of the legacy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
upgrade the legacy.
So, right. So it's
what's the life
part of the
cycle
thing.
Of the platform?
It's not a thing of, we still need our passwords, and so let's keep password policies because we still have this one legacy server. No, have a plan to migrate off of the legacy somehow. I don't know the answers. I don't know what your problems are, what the thing is that's legacy, but it should be part of the plan to do this. Is to, just saying, we're using Hello for Business, but we can still try to get you as far away from needing that password as possible, as far away from needing that legacy authentication as possible.
You don't get to have all the shiny cloud management and cloud things, and also keep your on-prem stuff. There are ways to utilize those. There are workarounds and solutions that are very reliable, but they're not designed to be a permanent thing. Really, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be leveraged as this is how we're moving forward.
And it's also a matter of sitting there and doing the risk assessment. Mm-hmm. If your system's still relying on older protocols for authentication, you need to assess what data is being stored in there. Is it mission critical? What happens if it gets hacked? What happens if somebody bypasses it? Because let's face it, if they're using older protocols for authentication, what else haven't they updated?
Yeah, exactly. Well, because this is interesting, Steve. I was going to say, if you change the conversation key points, so let's not talk about next gen credentials. Let's say it's like sample 1, for example. It's that scenario where you just go, I just need it. You're like, no, there's a huge concern here. Now, obviously, legacy credentials aren't at the same security problem as SMB1, but it's the same concept, right? It's legacy for a reason.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I mean, this takes us down that security rabbit hole, which you guys know I love, but we
all love that rabbit hole.
I think that it's an interesting piece there. So we look at as an end user, as just a consumer of passwords, I just know that if I type my password in, a thing happens and I get access to it. But
Mhm.
what's neat here, as we're talking through this, is that we've got the password, or we're talking about the ways that that password gets used on the systems you're trying to access, right? So you can use Kerberos and get a really secure access, really secure credentialing on that. Man, will you guys quit texting me? They're messing with me in the chat. Okay, fine. All right. Anyway, the idea here is that you can have something that uses legacy authentication with that same password that can use a high level of authentication, high security authentication. And so it's deceptive because you say, well, it's just it's the same password. What's it matter? Well, it's how that system is consuming and using and storing and all of those things around that password, and how easy it is to force your way into that system. Because if they have a weak authentication method that's processing that credential, well, it's going to be easier for someone to get into that system. So back to your point of think about what you're storing there. So
that's correct. Go
back to the Hello for Business deal. And so we want to use our passwordless. And part of what happens here is when you create that, when you set up Hello for Business, you use your password one time to send an authentication or to authenticate you with two-factor, multi-factor to Azure AD to prove who you are, and then you store that credential and you no longer need that password. So that password is not stored locally on that device until some point when you need to log in with the password. And that's a piece I'm curious about. So we talk about the password hash not being stored on the machine if you're using Hello for Business. But what happens if you're using if you end up using that password? Does is the hash getting stored?
Only for the life of the token.
Yeah.
It's the same as if you're using a standard username password. So if you sign out, the password hash disappears.
Yeah, that's the point. This whole thing is supposed to be it's using the principles of modern authentication on the internet. So everything is short lifespan tokens that simply say, I am who I am. Can you please take this token and give me the access that I need? And the point is that if that ever gets captured, then it's only a problem while it's live. So if you drop the time span down to a very short amount of time, and this is even the same thing as authenticating to Graph, right? The token that you get is very, very short. There's a refresh token that's significantly longer, but that's generally not exposed. But the point is that I don't particularly care if someone gets my my AAD token because it's going to expire very quickly. So who cares?
Sure. Exactly.
Cool. And so to wrap all that up, essentially, Hello for Business allows you to create a next generation credential that you can securely store separate components of in the local device, machine specific, a machine specific next gen credential.
Yes.
You can store on a store locally on the device and in your Azure AD user object, and can also sync it down to Active Directory to use instead of a password to grant Kerberos authentication to on-premises resources or other access within Azure AD directly. So, give it a shot. I mean, I think it's just a fantastic thing.
Like, honestly, your end users will be so happier with the solution. And look, it takes a couple of days of planning, strategizing, and getting your end users to engage in it. But it's one of these things that once it's there, they're going to be super happy with the solution.
Yeah. I've actually run into scenarios where people are using Hello for Business and they introduce hardware or solutions that don't they just can't handle AAD, right? So they need that on-prem authentication, but their users are so happy with the biometric authentication that they're like, well, we have to implement some kind of the hybrid key trust stuff, because the users are just so happy with the biometric login that trying to roll that back is just a non-start conversation. There's no way.
Yeah. So one final thought. So one thing that came up during our discussion on this the other day was the idea that privacy. So biometrics, saying, well, I don't want my picture or my credential or my fingerprint or whatever stored. I don't want a picture of myself stored on the chip. And well, when does that get passed on? And it doesn't. You have a digital representation of pieces of your face or of your fingerprint that gets stored, but it's not an actual picture. And you're not. And so it's encrypted.
It's measurements.
It's encrypted before it gets stored in the TPM to use, and it's only used on that device. It never leaves that device. It's only used for unlocking and locking that your TPM to pull out your. And so there is no privacy concern here. However, point being, you do have the ability to set up policies on the PIN to make it complex and things if you need to.
Yeah.
And you cannot, as Steve informed me that you cannot enforce the biometric piece. And the main concern there is if you're using all biometric and you lose an eye and your finger, how do you unlock your machine?
Always needs to be a fallback.
You have to have the PIN, but you can add some complexity to the PIN if you need to. Yep. You can have it, it can be a password.
You can have it as an alphanumeric PIN.
Yeah, that's not a thing. PIN. Personal identifiable number. If you were doing alphanumeric pins, yes, yeah. Rage. You cannot change the definition of number. You cannot. I think. Oh yeah. Okay. That's yeah.
It's on the page, man. It's in there. You can configure it. All right, let's wrap it up. I think it's a great discussion. Hopefully you find it helpful. We'll try to have some good bookmarks in there. Somebody will put bookmarks in. We'll have links, things.
Thanks, Bob.
Probably already seen them. You should always check the description, because there's lots of stuff in the descriptions and all that stuff. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
So.